am Nisham, and this is World's Creative Identities. At each episode, I speak with someone who's either great at creatively expressing themselves or also at helping others' worlds come to life through words, shapes, and colors. My not so secret goal is to get to meet amazing people who will share and help spread the love of human nature. Journalists, biography writers, designers, documentary makers, or in this case, an expert in negotiation and mediation with over 35 years of experience. Today, as you can see it, I am very excited to chat with Susan Coleman. I discovered her on Spotify as I was searching for a podcast in a specific theme, and hers was named after that theme, the Peace Building Podcast, From Conflict to Common Ground. It is an absolute goldmine of interviews with incredible peace builders from around the globe, most of which she has collaborated with. Susan worked from war zones to boardrooms, teaching people negotiation skills, mediation, conflict, and supporting clients in collaborative change initiatives through facilitation and coaching. She has worked with tens of thousands of people in 34 countries on just about every continent and with hundreds of organizations, governments, teams, and individuals. I've also heard her describe herself as part capitalist because she loves creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship, part socialist because she believes in bringing care where it is needed, and part rogue goddess because she believes in a world beyond domination. I think I've said enough for the beginning. So hello, Susan, and thank you so much for being with me here today.
Hi, Nisha. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure and an honor to always to speak. And thanks.
Well, the honor is ours, I think, because I can't believe everything that must be in your brain and in your heart, because all the personal experience you had on the field, all the experience you developed through working with people, through having such great colleagues, I guess, also in your network, and all the interviews you did. So 1 hour is not nearly going to be enough, but I am so happy to have these minutes with you. Can you maybe, to get started, give us a little definition on peace building and what it means to be a peace builder?
Wow. Well, I will say about that, my podcast, which I have a bit of a heavy heart at the moment because I haven't done an episode for a while because I'm working on a book. And as a solopreneur, which I've been for most of my career, it's hard to do everything at once. And so, but I'm really anxious to get back to my podcast. What happened with the podcast is I had been doing large group facilitation for a long time. And you see many of those interviews on the podcast about methods to build common ground. And in the course of doing that, it became really clear to me that the most impactful peace building intervention we could do on the planet was to really get gender right, to really have gender equality. It's a big move because patriarchy, if you don't mind that word, has been with us for a long time. That's a term that I don't use anti-men at all. It's a term, a social structure that's really based on a dominance. And I'm really interested, I guess, when you say what's in my heart, to be honest, and don't like being a downer, but some sadness is in my heart, some sadness and real compassion for who we are as humans, and how amazing we are, and how we are really at an early stage of our development, I think, according to some specialists that are beyond my pay grade. But how much the obstacles that we're facing right now are scary. But also in that, I'm also excited because I think, like everybody who's in the field of mediation and conflict resolution, that crisis is opportunity. That sounds cliched, but I think it's true. I think we really are looking at a possibility of birthing a new era that is beyond that dominator model, and is much more based on one that's about partnership.
So creating a world where there is more partnership than domination. Can we say that this is peace building?
I think peace building, yes, absolutely. And I think that for me, my focus on peace building is about process, because negotiation itself or conflict communication
Mhm.
carries the essence of what we can do at the individual level, the community level, and the global level. And also because my audience right now has been more, I've been aiming my words towards women more. Well, I have a lot of male followers and a lot of
Mhm.
men. Men have been some of my very best supporters. My partner is one of my very best supporters, and he's a guy.
Yeah.
um, um, but is that I think that women as a group,
Mhm.
that we're no angels, but we have the capacity. We have been the largest untapped resource really on the planet, and I think we are more collaborative as in our DNA, and I think we have the capacity to be the collaborative leadership force that
Mhm.
the planet is really needing right now. But that's going to require us. It's not like we don't already have so much on our plate. Women have so much on our, but we also have the ability to really step it up and say,
Mhm.
okay, we actually are going to start saying no to violence at this point. We're not interested in this as a planetary measure anymore. There's too much of it. It's threatening all of us, and no. So no in our homes, no in our communities,
Mhm.
no on the global stage. And we need more women at the peace tables, because the research is really clear that when you have women at the negotiating table, we have much stronger and more durable
Mhm.
outcomes.
Yes, and I've heard you in some of your interviews recognizing that in schools or therapy sessions, and there are more women usually. It's like because I did a coaching school to become a coach, and I think 70 or 80% was women in the class. I was listening to my favorite of your episodes was with Thomas Hübl. I don't
Mhm.
know how to say his name, maybe,
People, yeah,
but like that, and you were saying, wow, mostly women come to your sessions about collective trauma and healing it. So I guess there is something happening naturally also in women wanting to go towards these deeper empathy, deeper understanding, deeper communication spaces, right?
I think so. I think so. And I think what we have to be careful as women of doing is, you know, there's a tendency to revere the feminine but disparage it, in fact. And I think women are guilty of that as well. Sometimes we will side with the masculine side, either by, and I'm not saying all, I think humans are both masculine and feminine.
Yes.
We're not one or the
Yin and
other.
yang.
But 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 I think we can stand proudly for some of what the feminine is, because I think many of us relate to it in both in our professions, like you
Mhm.
say. If you look at the coaching profession, a lot of women. If you look at the therapy profession, a lot of women. If you look at the peace building profession, a lot of women, because I think we are intuiting and
Mhm.
feeling that we can create a different world order. I mean, I think also, I don't know about you, but I am so tired of being divided by race and color.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of women around the planet, we know how much we have in common. I mean, yes, we are from different tribes, but at the end of the day, I think we all have a
Mhm.
very good sense of what it means to be female on the planet, and are able to transcend
Mhm.
race and color, because it's so often used in a more dominant
Mhm.
system to divide people.
Yes, exactly. And I think, not to be too cliche, but I think there is a part of us that is connected to nurturing
Mhm.
instinctively. And nurturing, I think, means embracing abundance, embracing diversity, wanting to celebrate it. I mean, and I think that all the dominance comes from controlling rather than nurturing. Controlling means like closing, and there's little space to grow. And as growers, I think the yin and yang separation brings a little bit of that too. Like we need the space to grow, the space to have multiple types of individuals, whether it's gender, sexual choices, any kind of identity, I think is really, I mean, this podcast is called Creative Identities. It's not always clear, but that's what I mean by it too. To have the possibility
Mhm.
to create from what we were born into, and to meet others. So there's a question I really want to ask you. So I wanted to ask it at the beginning, so we're sure we have the time for it. You speak about systems a lot, and that's the part that's really interesting to me as well, because throughout what I have been reading and listening to, I can see, as you said, that there are multiple levels at which work needs to be done. The levels of urgent mediation to resolve the conflicts, to negotiate, but then also on community levels, on individual levels, people who don't know why they behave the way they behave. Can they really go towards peace when they're acting out of anger or fear? So, if you had a magical wand, how do you say
One, yeah.
wand, and you could put in work a roadmap globally, how would that system be changing? I know this is a very big question, and we can't answer it like this, but do you have some fantasies of, if I had the power, this is exactly the plan I would like all the countries to operate, whether it's on education level, society level? What's your dream system change?
In very short words, I would just say in circles
Okay.
versus. And what I mean by that is, I think that, I mean, I was trained as a lawyer, and I worked on Wall Street for a while as a litigator. And, I think that is the essence of it's in the United States, it's referred to as the adversary system. It's very win-lose,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it has its place. I mean, I think that legal structures are better than just simple power structures. Rules, having a rules-based system is not a bad idea. But I think it also, and I think this differs around the world, and my country is highly individualistic and highly litigious, and we've sort of exported that in a lot of places around the world. And I think as an American woman, I am proud to try and counter that,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think it's necessarily what American women would do. I think it's what my country has done. But so systemically, uh, I have had some amazing experiences where, and I feel very confident, honestly, that if you gave me a group of conflicting, very diverse
Mm-hmm.
people, and you gave me the time and the right space, I could bring that group together and have them move to a place where they're coming up with
Mm-hmm.
creative outcomes collaboratively. And I've done it enough times that I really believe that it's true. I think sort of parliamentary structures often lead to more adversarial debate. An
Mm-hmm.
adversarial debate ends up in a kind of escalatory win lose, one side trying to
Mm-hmm.
dominate the other. So I think the more we bring human beings into circles, set up some really good guidelines, simple guidelines for how we communicate with each other, I think we're really good at self organizing. We're really good at I've used open space a lot in my practice. Open space technology is a kind of process that I think so much as embodies what is needed. And it's been all over the world with great success. I've never not seen it work.
Mm-hmm. Can you
Um,
define for our audiences a little bit what you mean by open space technology?
yeah, it's a very simple process that was. I mean, I don't think he would say it was founded by Harrison Owen, but most of us say it was founded by Harrison Owen. And it's you just if you have a conflict that's as many as 1,000 people, and you want it done yesterday, you can use the process of open space to bring them all together
Mm-hmm.
through a process of invitation, and you can have one facilitator,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of magical, the whole thing. Uh, and with very simple guidelines, there's only one rule, which is the law of 2 feet. And the law of 2 feet means that if you open space, I will say, works on passion and responsibility. So you come up with a theme, for why you're there.
Mhm.
And then everybody, one of the guidelines is that everybody's dedicated to using their passion and responsibility to work on that theme for
Mhm.
the time that you have. And the one law is that if you ever feel like you're in a space where you're not contributing, you have a right. In fact, you have a responsibility and a right to use your 2 feet to go somewhere where you can contribute to actually that theme.
Mhm.
So it gets rid of the control freaks. Like I've done some open spaces where, there were organizational systems where there was somebody that was really trying to dominate and
Mhm.
in just very destructive ways. And what happens in an open space is people just ignore them. They just move on. They go somewhere else. It's really
That's
funny.
great.
There's no trying to control the agenda or whatever. So I won't go into detail about how, but if you're interested in open space, there's Open Space World. I think .org is the website
Mhm.
that talks
I'm
a lot
gonna
more.
look.
And I have some podcasts about it. I have an interview with Harrison Owen,
Mhm.
but I also wrote about it recently in my Substack. I have a Substack, which
Yeah.
I'm blogging weekly
Mhm.
on women negotiation and collaborative power. And one of my Substacks, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago, was
Mhm.
about the contrasting open space. Well, I talk about my clothing because my clothing so personified it. In my legal world, I was more, in man mode with my
Mhm.
suits, and in
Mhm.
my open space mode or my facilitator mode, much more flowy
Mhm.
clothes, much more goddess-like clothes. So far, I prefer.
Oh, I love it. That's great. And so you say that if you could have that magical power, you would create more of those circles everywhere on the world. Like, could we say that? Because I believe deeply that everyone would benefit from even frequently every year having moments where they go meet different people, where they are put in spaces where they're going to be surprised by values, lifestyles, and like keep opening that, keep being exposed to different thoughts and things like. Do you feel like this is something the world is progressing towards? Like, do you feel like there's more support and openness towards these types of things, or do you feel like there are still people maybe blocking the development of these things?
Both. I think both are true. I think that there are many of us. I was just looking on at Theory U. God, that guy at MIT. Now his name is it's escaping me at the moment, but he posted some beautiful circles happening. And this is around climate, but people from all over the world coming
Mhm.
together in a circle. And I don't know exactly what that process was,
Mhm.
but I can imagine I've facilitated enough processes to know that like I said, you really can set up some very simple guidelines, and human beings, we're quite good at self-organizing if we set
Mhm.
up the right structure container for us to do it. So there's that. But then, of course, I've had, in my life as an organization development consultant, many leaders, managers, the top-down kind, they don't want to do a process that they don't know
Mhm.
the outcome of. They don't want to do something that they can't control.
Exactly.
And I find that kind of upset. It's upsetting, and it's because I am, at the end of the day, I yeah, I say I'm not a socialist, I'm not a capitalist. I'm neither of those.
Mhm.
I like the rogue goddess thing, but I really think that a world where people have a say over the decisions that affect
Mhm.
them, so that's democracy,
Yeah.
a deeper democracy. Like, I found myself the other day listening to the four or the three top AI
Mhm.
dudes, and they are dudes, and talking about how AI will save us all. Well, who said? And so what they're doing is they're scraping everybody's data. They're
Mhm.
ripping everybody off, all the copyright all over the world. They're just ripping it off because they've decided that this is what's going to save the world. Well, I don't know. I just don't really think that's how I want decision making to go. I think you
Yeah.
get humans in a room, you put us in a circle, you give us a complex question, we will come up with solutions that
Mhm.
really work for the majority of us in the room that are
Yeah.
creative and life enhancing.
And I mean, I think the issue there, in my opinion, also is that when they want to save the world, what is their goal? Because how do they define the saving? Because for me, a world in which we don't develop the wisdom of understanding what's happening within and how did we land here, like you talked a lot about, like with your interviewees, about digesting the past, like how
Mhm.
do we build a better future without having digested the past? And with AI, my fear also is that everything is going faster and faster, even less time for digestion. And so, uh, who are we going to end up being? Like, if the AI saved us, cool, game over, and we didn't even go through our own challenges. Like, what is that world? But you were talking about dominators, and I'm curious also because as someone who works with people on their limiting programs and how they became who they are, I also find it very important to work with kids and parents to understand who they're becoming, because I don't know if you're familiar with Ayurveda, but it's a
Mhm.
tool that helps me
I'm
often
very
with
pitta.
sorry.
I'm very pitta.
I can see it. But yeah, and so that pitta, when you found your purpose, for people who don't know what that means, pitta people have a lot of drive, a lot of passion, and they need a purpose. If they don't have the purpose, then they can, instead of being creative and constructive, they can become destructive. And so when there is a pitta kid and the parents don't know how to feed them, then instead of becoming great leaders who bring change positively, then they can create the problems and become dominators as well. And I feel like it's not okay. Like you were talking about legal rules, and I feel like when people go to power positions, like when whether it's in a company, in a country, in a community, I feel like they owe it to everyone to have done some work on themselves. So is it too controlling of me to wish this? I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like, I feel like in today's world, and as climate change is accelerating some of the importance of change, I
Mm.
feel like we are owed to know that some of the people don't risk pushing on red buttons because they have mama issues, like that they haven't had a chance on working on. How do you feel about that? Like, how can we do some work to prevent these dominators to keep being produced?
It's a really, I think it's a great question and a really important one. I mean, right now in my country, it's no surprise to the whole world, I'm sure, not that
Mhm.
everyone's paying attention to the United States, but, we're dealing with Donald Trump, and
Oh.
he's taken a lot of oxygen out of everything. He's affected many movements in other parts of the globe, and of course,
Mhm.
there's a whole global culture of people that would like concentration of power to be at the top.
Mhm.
And I guess Donald Trump has been their man because he's a good salesman. And but the thing that I think for women that we need to really ask ourselves is how much we enable that behavior.
Mhm.
I think there are a lot of, and again, I'll refer to what's happening in my country because it's such a crisis point at the
Yeah.
moment. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to prevail. I just am choosing to believe that, but
Mhm.
it's scary because we may suddenly be looking at a fascist situation in the United States, which
Yeah.
is really scary because I think it will reverberate it, the world. Whatever, we're a very small planet,
Mhm.
um, but but the role that there are women that are his key mouthpieces, and they're the key they're big enablers of him.
Mhm.
And I think if as women, when I say we can be the collaborative leadership force that the planet needs, that requires us to really transcend any tendency we have towards
Mhm.
codependence, any tendency we have towards not really fully embracing our power to lead, to influence, not to dominate, but to lead and influence and really participate in the world and say, no to bullies like Donald Trump,
Mhm.
or people that want to use a dominator model, because I don't think it's working anymore, and I think it's killing nature.
Mhm.
It is killing nature. I don't think it is, and I think one of the things I think about myself as a woman, and I think many of us who are living in female bodies is, and particularly those of us, well, many of us who have had children, we know the ferocity of wanting to protect our children. And
Mhm.
I, at this point, feel so angry that my
Mhm.
kids are looking at a world that doesn't look like it could support them. It
Mhm.
makes me furious. And then it makes me um, hopeful. Well, I'll continue with the fury for a few more minutes. I think the petrochemical industry is very parallel to patriarchy. I wanted a blog called Petromasculinity, because it's just some of these companies are like ExxonMobil. It's like, well, we realized that we could make money off of wind and solar, but we're just not going to make as much money. So we're going to
Mhm.
abandon all of those techniques. And then I hear them, they're advertising this morning about carbon capture and
Mhm.
which is not a real solution. They're just
Mhm.
doing some more, and the people that they use for those ads are always black women. And I'm like, "Oh
Mhm.
my God,
Don't like yourself being used. Yeah.
they're so evil, really." So, um that makes me really frustrated. But then and now I'm losing my train. I think my point is to be hopeful, because I do think I think it's just to really
Mhm.
put inspire
Mhm.
women as a group. William Ury, who has been a big influencer to me, he wrote the book Getting to Yes. He just wrote a wonderful book, Possible, that I did a book review of on
Mhm.
my podcast. But he talks about the power of the third side in conflict.
Mhm.
And I wrote to him afterwards, after I did the book review. I sent it to him, and I said, I think William, I think women really are the third side on this planet.
Mhm.
We haven't always realized it, but we really. He said, Absolutely, we are.
Mhm.
We are." And I think the more we realize that, the more
Mhm.
we realize our power in that, the more we realize our tendency to be networked, to support
Mhm.
each other. I'm not saying we all do this, but many of us, I think, can do it more intuitively.
Mhm.
I I get annoyed at the word gossip, because and my partner, he sometimes has used the words, and I say, it's not. It's, yeah, because women like in the United States, in the
Mhm.
Salem, in the early days of the country, women who were supposed gossips, literally, was awful, would like get put on these stands in the public square, and I think it was like awful, like torture things to keep their mouths open, and
Oh.
I but the reality is, I think I have a different frame on gossip. I think women talk to each other. We do, we
Mhm.
talk to each other. Like in
Yeah.
my community, it's the women talking to each other that really kind of networks the
Mhm.
community.
That's true.
Um, and yeah. So
Yeah, I think we're the nervous system of the planet. We're like sending each other the information, and
yeah,
also like we're each other's therapists also, like with our best friends, like allowing each other's feelings, and
yeah, 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 yeah,
it's a
yeah.
natural system.
Mm.
And I also like to talk about the kids that we were before we become who we are. So, what kind of girl were you? Like, I always love to ask the question, what was your favorite? What were your favorite games? That helps us understand your mind a little and how you became this peace builder that you are today.
Yeah, my favorite games where I was blessed to live close to the natural world, and I spent a lot of time in the natural world.
Hmm.
And for instance, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house at the east end of Long Island, which at that point was pretty rural. And my best friend Meredith and we went out into the woods, and we found these boardwalks that had been thrown away or something, and we tied them together, and we found sticks, and we kind of made these Kontiki rafts, and we would, just
Oh,
float,
cool.
float through these shallow ponds looking for box turtles and things like that. And so that's what first comes to mind. And we also, my friend Meredith, who's no longer with us, we also would spend a lot of time underneath bushes with dinky cars that were little, miniature cars and trucks, and we would
Okay.
we would build roads, and I don't know, and we just spent hours doing that kind of thing in the dirt. I spent a lot of time in the dirt or in nature, which
I love it.
lucky me.
It's funny because I just had lunch with a lady who has a powerful position in here in Luxembourg, and we were talking about Ayurveda, and she said I asked her her favorite games, and she literally just talked about matchboxes, cars, and trucks, and then
Oh, well, same thing. Matchbox.
running
What's
outside.
Dinky Matchbox? That was the name of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe she's a Pita as well. Like the fact of being outside, being free, having sensations, physical sensations of either the car going fast or the wind in your face, and seeing that you've been everywhere in the world. I think you need that kind of natural courage and passion for exploration to do things like this. So, okay, now we can visualize a little bit the girl you were that is today empowering the women and people around the world. If you had a top three of places you've been to where you feel like it's made your world bigger, like wider, because you learned things,
Mm.
where would those places be? Whether it has been professionally or personal on your personal time.
Well, two of them came to my mind right away. The first was the the war zones that I've been in.
Mhm.
One in South Sudan. I mean, I think I've been to Juba a number of times with UN's peacekeeping and to other peacekeeping missions. But arriving there and just seeing this memory of this young girl, very thin, sitting on top of a mound of plastic water bottles. I don't know, that
Mhm.
scene just kind of got seared into my memory. I mean, I could talk a lot about those peacekeeping missions, but that's one space that, traveling to those places, going to Afghanistan was,
Mhm.
put in that same category. I was so sad because we did such great work with the women leaders in Afghanistan, and then Donald Trump got elected, and the whole thing, we were going to go back, and the whole thing got shut down.
Yeah, that is so unforgivable. Like the hard work people are doing, and yeah.
Yeah. So that's one. Another one is uh, I was also blessed to go when I was a kid, when I was 6 or 7, to no, I guess I was older when this happened, to go out to this ranch in Wyoming, and I got given, at that time the world was much freer too, way less litigious, and they just gave me my own horse, and I just went off and rode all around those mountains there was like 8,000 feet, and I can't translate that to meters quickly, but just beautiful terrain. And I actually, speaking of feast building, I was really into that song Woodstock that was written by Joni Mitchell. I came upon a child of God who was walking across the road, and I asked him where he's going. This he told me. It makes me sort of choke up to think about it, but I would sing that song all the time, which is so much about peace building,
Mhm.
really. So that's a place, and then you asked for three
It
places, three places that have really
made your world bigger for you,
made
but two
my
are
world bigger.
fun too. If you don't want to keep thinking, like two
Well,
is
those,
great too.
those, you know, those, I guess those are, I could make those into three, but, being by myself on a
Mhm.
horse and having a relationship with a horse in the wild, which I don't think really people often are allowed to do
Yeah,
anymore,
so magical.
and then having the courage, which I'm really grateful to myself for having the courage to go to war zones. I mean, to be fair, I do have UN security when I do that, so it's
Mhm.
not like going off on my own.
Of course, but it's more danger than anyone has known living in cities, I think. So
Right, right.
even if you're protected, you never know
Yeah.
what might happen. I'm also curious to hear about the process of how that goes because I have two jobs and both start with briefs. Like I work in communications and coaching,
Both
and
start with, oh, would you say both start with what?
with a brief with
Oh,
there's a need somewhere and I receive a brief and then I have to build a
see.
methodology about it. Like how does it start for you? If we take the first example you said in Afghanistan, like so let's say you're going about your life and then how does the project come into your life and what happens until you go there? Like what's the preparation phase? Who's coming to tell you there's something for you, Susan? Come help us. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, mostly that's been word of mouth at this point because I've
Mm-hmm.
been around for 35 years. People reach out, client systems reach out to me and ask me to do a piece of work. And then I think that so much of it is about the pre-work, getting things ready.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to send out a letter to everybody. I do a needs assessment. One of the things that I find so useful to do with systems in conflict
Mm-hmm.
is to have people answer questionnaires, and then I condense what I'm hearing, and then when
Mm-hmm.
I'm with them, I reflect
And
that back.
who's the client? Like, if you can give us one tangible example, like who was the client? What was the piece of work they needed specifically you to jump in? If we can give a story so people can imagine it in their heads.
Uh, well, I guess since I mentioned the Afghanistan
Mm-hmm.
one, that was UN Women, and they did a leadership training it was multiple interventions.
Mm-hmm.
We were first in Tajikistan for I forget how long we were, a week, 10 days. And then we were in Afghanistan again subsequently. So we were doing, and there were a bunch of us that were involved, consultants, and I was the one that was specifically focusing on negotiation skills and
Mm-hmm.
collaborative negotiation skills. Uh, what's great about that lens is just that you really can get to the detail. People learn so much about what their instincts are and what their strengths are when they are doing negotiation simulations. That also happens when I'm doing like live interventions because that's other things that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
But but yeah, people really see where they are, what they're doing well, and how they could grow,
Mm-hmm.
and how that connects to building a more collaborative world because it shows up in how we actually
Mm-hmm.
negotiate.
And the women you train in those countries where you go are supposed to become the local peace builders there, or is it
No,
simply women
those
who?
in that case, those were the senior leaders in the Afghan government, women
Okay,
leaders.
okay,
That's what that
okay.
was.
It
Yeah,
was really the local leaders. Okay,
yeah.
wow. And
And then I mean, I've done both kind of two things. Training. I've done a lot of training, but when I train, I tend to also work live conflict in the system because I tend to train inside an organizational
Mhm,
system. So inevitably there's conflict and I
mhm,
will work it as part of the training program.
mhm,
And then I have done interventions. I hate that word, but um, I did one in South Sudan with a leader that was really imploding,
mhm,
and but I tend to work systemically. I worked when I was doing that work. I worked again. That was through the UN system, but I worked both as a coach. I
mhm.
worked as a facilitator. I worked as a mediator. I was doing lots of different.
But what do you mean by imploding? Like, was he having
He
a hard time
was
because of the system and he needed support, or was he the issue?
he was the issue. He was getting huge pushback from all over the place, and the system was trying to figure out what to do about it.
So the peace builder really has to be like a global strategist. Like you have to understand what he's doing, in what system he's functioning, what's the context, and be able to put it all together to help the person navigate to a better behavior, kind of, right?
Yeah, and of course, as a mediator, I mean, I often don't use the word mediator. Sometimes I
Mhm.
just use the word facilitator. But as that kind of an intervener, I'm not imposing an outcome on
Of course.
anybody ever.
Hmm.
Ever. Uh, I'm facilitating I'm building awareness in the system,
Hmm.
and I am helping the system figure out the how to move
Yeah.
forward. And in this case, with that guy, he left, which I'm not surprised that he
Hmm.
left. But I didn't do that. It's tricky. It's tricky because I'm not trying to be the decision maker.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
Of course, but at the very beginning, you were talking about how there are dominating figures who don't want things they can't control, outcomes they can't control. And that happens often in coaching. If the leaders don't let themselves be coached, but they allow the teams being coached, often the teams will leave because the system is not allowing them to apply their forces, their strengths, and potential. So I'm not surprised that sometimes people can leave. I've also read that you worked for NASA. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because in our minds, I'm sure it's the most famous name, the UN and NASA, in everything you're talking about.
yeah,
There
yeah.
are things we
That's
can
been a
imagine.
really fun. I've worked for them for gosh, I think now maybe 25. I don't know. It's a lot of years now. I haven't gone back to count, but and also it's that has been a training thing, and it started and it still is. It's international negotiations, but
Okay.
it's really because so many of well, initially, when I started doing that work, I was working with just NASA, so just U.S. government officials,
Mhm.
and I will take some of the credit, although I don't. I'm sure it was many of us who, but I was saying like, hey, if you want to know how to deal with culture and difference and negotiate together effectively, let's get them into the room. And so I don't know how that happened, but I know I said it many times. And
Yeah.
sure enough, they started doing those trainings with their space partners. And now it tends to be Japanese is always there, ESA is always there, the European Space Agency, the Canadians, the
Hmm.
Australians. There were Russians at one point. I've never seen any Chinese in the room, unfortunately, and there are no more Russians in the room.
Hmm.
So, but those things change over time. But what's cool about it is I like looking up and seeing the International Space Station, which all of us can see going around
Hmm.
our planet, and knowing that part of what's gone on there I mean, I didn't work with astronauts, but I worked with all the people. I work with
Hmm.
all the
And
people
put them up there.
they're supporting the astronauts, and
Yeah.
that those people have been supported in that effort of really working together cooperatively and creatively.
I'm really curious about this topic because in Luxembourg we have 3 to 4 official languages. The population is more foreigners than locals, and it's continuing to evolve every day. When you mean intercultural skills, what are those skills? Like, do you need to study every culture to understand how to communicate with a Swedish person versus a Chinese one? Or is there like muscles to develop that are common to being able to listen to differences? Like, how would you explain to us how someone becomes better at communicating interculturally?
Well, yeah, maybe I'll come back to the word dominant versus partnership, because if you're in a win-lose kind of
Mm-hmm.
modality, or you're in a like, okay, our culture is going to be dominant here,
Okay.
then you're imposing a certain assumptions about how things should go,
Mm-hmm.
how you should twist the bolts on a spacecraft, oh, you do it this way, no, you don't, versus really paying attention or having an awareness that human beings, we have different ways of dealing with life's challenges
Mm-hmm.
that are based on culture. And there isn't really a right or wrong. There is
Mm-hmm.
just difference. And so if somebody has an intercultural worldview, they understand that they are a cultural being. We all are cultural beings, and we are limited in our lens, by how we've been acculturated. But I will also say that I will use Emma Watson, who said, patriarchy is the largest superpower on the planet, which I think of as the largest culture.
Hmm.
There's a lot of assumptions about who is dominant over
Yeah.
who, and who has more intelligence over who, and who is more godlike than who.
Hmm.
And that's one of the shifts that I hope really is occurring. And I think it is occurring. I think so many
Yeah.
women and men alike are trying to throw off that cultural assumption so that we can show up with our maximum creativity together. But that's a cultural phenomenon because there are a set of assumptions about life
Hmm.
that are affecting what we do, how we proceed, who we think is a leader, who we think negotiates,
Exactly.
who doesn't negotiate, who we should listen to, who we shouldn't listen to.
Yeah,
It,
and
yeah.
I think in what you're saying, the notion of awareness is really interesting too, because even ourselves often we don't realize which parts of our behavior might be cultural or is it just me. Because I have a very close friend; she's an amazing woman. But I often observe, I'm Turkish and she is as well, and she will be listening to this, I think. But she often, when she speaks in other languages, comes off as a bit brutal. And she sometimes sends me her emails, and I'm her softener. I read her emails, and I'm like, okay, what you're trying to say is this thing, and you don't need this way of saying it. So here we go. But the issue is, I can't, of course, be there all the time. She's really smart, and everyone knows they need her. But that is totally cultural, I think, because the sentences, when I translate them literally into Turkish, they don't sound as they would sound in French.
Hmm.
And people around her, because the dominant culture is French, they will not realize that this is not just her character. This is the way you build a sentence in Turkish. And
Hmm.
so I think there must be a lot of people suffering from those things without even knowing it's cultural.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's no
Yes, I
question
think
about
I
it.
think the first thing is awareness. Is
Yeah.
what do they say? The fish is the last one to know that it's swimming in water. To just
So,
know that we have a lot of cultural influences. I mean, this whole thing of fake news, Nishem. I sometimes think it's been going on for as long as thousands of years. People have been trying to control the narrative.
mhm.
Um, but um, but that affects so many assumptions that we have about life,
Yeah.
and I think if women, as right now, what I'm like talking about is us becoming that collaborative leadership force that is so needed on the planet.
Mhm.
It will require that we transcend that a lot of that conditioning that has made us feel
Yeah.
like the second class,
Mhm.
third class, or whatever citizens on the
And
planet.
how do you suggest, like, if a woman, randomly said, wanted to become a peace builder, like, what are the steps today to study it, to find your place in that community? Like, what would you advise someone who's interested in this?
Hmm. Well, I do have, people reach out to me a lot to ask me that question. And of course, there are so many ways
Mhm.
to be a quote unquote peace builder.
Mhm.
I loved what Dr. Scylla Elworthy just wrote the other day. I posted it on my Substack. It's how, I think the title of that post was How Women Can Stop Wars.
Mhm.
Uh, I recommend you read that. I
Mhm.
thought she did a really, with my Substack, I'm trying to keep all those posts
Mhm.
to 1,000 words. So, something that people could read in a short period of time.
Mhm.
So hers was, it was a short piece, but it really talked about, you know, all these different levels of system, what you
Mhm.
can do at home, what you can do at work, what you can do, and then the need to have more women at negotiating tables.
Yeah.
But the reality is, you know, 1 in 4, 1 in 3, I think it's 1 in 3 women are still subjected to sexual assault in our
Mhm.
lifetime globally. That's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, so becoming a peace builder, part of it is recognizing that those things are true and getting out of any kind of haze that we might be in and saying, okay, no, we're going to create a different kind of world order where we feel safe to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that kind of peace building. There's learning the skill, which is one of the things I'm trying to do, is really teach people the skill of collaborative negotiation, which I think, which is also includes also understanding negotiation in general, adversarial negotiation, competitive negotiation, but not being scared of it,
Mm-hmm.
not being fluent in it, because the more we're fluent in it,
Mm-hmm.
it is the core leadership skill, and um, that it is the core skill that is needed to build peace on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more that we, as the third side, as William Murray would say, get those skills, the more we are going to shift culture and create a different kind of
Mm-hmm.
world order, a new era. I think that if there's any positive to the climate crisis, it's that it's going to push all of us into some real urgent shifts
Mm-hmm.
about how we have been doing things, if we're gonna survive. And I think we are going to survive, and I think we're going to survive in a new way. I think we're going to unfortunately be a bit hotter for quite a while, and we're going to see some destruction. We already are, but I think but but we're all going to grow and hopefully change for the better.
Oh, that's what we need to hear and to think. I had heard this expression "stubborn optimist." That it was Christiana Figueres, I think, who was using it, and I really loved it because often optimists can be mocked in the current world, saying that you don't see how everything's going badly, and well, yeah, it takes courage and energy to protect that optimism. And I'm curious, how do you protect your own optimism? Like, how do you feed yourself with positive psychology? Because we are
Mhm.
surrounded by the fake news, by
Mhm.
all types of negativity.
Mm.
How do you protect and nurture that in yourself?
Well, I will say one thing I do is to stay close to what makes me angry.
Okay.
Um, because I think that people getting better about dealing with, and I don't mean that toxic anger that can fly
Mm-hmm.
around the planet, particularly, yeah. Anyway, I don't mean that kind of anger, but I think women getting more connected, and I'll stay focused on to what makes us angry, being able to speak to it, being able to make it move us in positive directions. I think the more that happens, I
Mm-hmm.
think it will give us the courage to say, what patriarchy has created. This is not my words, but
Mm-hmm.
more theoreticians' words. Violence in men, and silence in women. Very simply put, I think the more that women are speaking up, able to get angry, getting good at negotiating and leading.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not saying that men are not good at these things. They are, but there's been a little bit of too much deference and oppression
Mm-hmm.
of us as a gender. And yeah, so I'm hoping that we are able to really transcend that and liven things up.
But it's really cool what you're saying because it's making good use of anger because
Yeah.
there are emotions. I mean, all emotions are there for change because they're informing us of something, and a lot of people I see are just eaten up by anger, but because they don't do anything about it, they just live in it, and it makes them sick and it spreads.
And
But it
depressed, yeah.
Yeah, and instead of that, like I come from a very conflictual country as well. In Turkey, we have all kinds of divide also, and all
Yeah.
kinds of beautiful people too.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who are just listening to the news and just being like fed with all the fears and also the belief that they don't have power. So they just powerlessly suck in the anger. But in coaching, we're taught that anger is about respect. What is being disrespected and how can we change it? And I love that you found your purpose in empowering women and changing things for them. But it was I don't have nearly your experience in these topics. And as someone who was discovering peace building, negotiation was not the first word that was coming to my mind, because I don't know if it was about me also, like a lot of women, having been put in a more softer area where it's safe for everyone to live
Mhm.
in just acceptance and
Mhm.
forgiveness. And
Mhm.
I felt like I was better at these things. But negotiation, I guess, comes with respecting your own rights and changing those things. Like, how do you feel? What do you observe? Like, are women you try to teach negotiation, do what kinds of blocks do they have before they get to allow themselves to just stand high and negotiate? Like, what are those steps? Can you tell us a bit?
Yeah. I think a very fundamental one is, what do you want?
Hmm.
And that's a simple question. What do I want? I ask myself that question every day. And I think I'm pretty good at answering it. But I also um, I think it's important for people who have been deferential, if you have been, or you have been really used to taking care of others, or putting yourself second or whatever. And you may choose to do that, but to really get clear about what you want, what you desire, what your vision is. Um, and then, and you may not, like I say, you may not decide that that's how
Hmm.
what you're going to negotiate for, but simply getting very clear about what you
Hmm.
want. Um, and I just wanted to back up on something you said in terms of my mission. My mission, yes, is to empower women through negotiation, through collaborative negotiation. And I want to continue. My book isn't. I want to continue with what I've been was doing in the podcast, which is, I think there are a lot of processes that bring in much more of the feminine. And what I mean by the feminine is an instinct to care for each other.
Hmm.
I don't think it's about all women do that. I just think it's
Hmm.
an instinct to be caring for each other, that is so needed on the planet. And also, there are processes that really allow that to happen much more.
Hmm.
Like, I think we can be each other's medicines. I think we
Yeah.
can really come up with good solutions together that are creative and fun,
Hmm.
much more fun. I mean, sometimes I think, oh my God, we could have so much fun on this planet. I mean, if we allowed ourselves, so much fun and pleasure. And it doesn't all have to be about production. It doesn't have to be all about making more money all the time. Uh, Gosh, I liked Gloria. I heard her say, Gloria Steinem say a little while ago. She said, "I think somebody needs to go to Harvard Business School and tell them that it's not all about money all the time."
Yes, please. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I also found that uh, fun and like positive emotions can sometimes be shortcuts too, because throughout years of coaching, now I developed a method about analyzing what people love, but like everything they have ever loved, to see where things cross and where their strengths are, where they want to go, where their values and meanings are. And sometimes I realize that even some healing happens where it would have been much more tough to go into trauma sessions, and because I do both sometimes when it's needed. But doing it collectively has been so fun too. And I've seen people who wouldn't have become friends because they were vibing on similar things they love. Suddenly, they didn't need to go through those differences because they were already meeting in a place of combined love. But yeah, it's and so maybe if you have a few more minutes, what's the book about? The book you're writing right now.
That, yes, yeah, thanks. The book is called Women, Negotiation, and Collaborative Power: New Earth, New World. It is it's sort of well, it does a lot of different things, but it covers the basics of negotiation, dealing with anger, dealing with trauma,
Mhm.
all the fundamentals for what collaboration looks like, using our bodies,
Mhm.
money. It covers a lot of different
Very
topics I
holistic.
think that are relevant. Um, And it also, I use my own story throughout and other women's stories. About in my own personal case, I think because I grew up I grew up basically in the middle of Wall Street, so I kind of grew up in the middle of like a real patriarchal worldview, and I
Familiar subject.
right up close to the source. And I have had to do a lot of like sort of re-educating myself and reconditioning myself. And so I use myself, using self as instrument, my story with my growing up years, my marriage, my professional life. My professional life has really been one of like finding ways and processes that are sort of post patriarchal. And I talk about those in the book. And yeah, so I'm at the moment, I've gotten three-quarters of it written, and I'm now, talking to different publishers.
Mhm.
And then I want to write the last quarter in collaboration with the publisher, because, of course, people have different views about what should be emphasized or de-emphasized. But it's one of the things that I'm enjoying is that I've found that I really do like to write. And so I do, if you're interested in anything you've been hearing, please check out my Substack. If
I
anybody
already subscribed, and I invite everyone to do so.
do that for free. One of the things I like about Substack is you could do it for free, or you can,
Mhm.
you can absolutely pay me too. I really, really welcome that too. But you can
Mhm.
subscribe for free, and
Mhm.
the posts are weekly, and I'm trying to capture a piece of what I'm doing in the book each time, but
Mhm.
something, just a short piece that you can digest about
Mhm.
this. With invitations to reflect on some topics that hopefully would be helpful to you in your life and
Mhm.
all of our lives in evolution. Yeah. So
Well,
that's the
that
book.
is a great gift.
Mm.
You're writing. Hmm.
And hopefully soon I'm going to be podcasting again, which, as I said, I miss doing that for the same reason that you liked. It's really an amazing
Hmm.
way. I mean, what I did with the podcast before is it was processes to build common ground. It will still be that, but I
Hmm.
really am going to emphasize what I mean by the feminine. What
Hmm.
does it mean to bring the feminine into systems? What does it mean to empower women? What does it mean to bring, have different kinds of feminine processes?
Hmm.
Uh, what are we talking about here? What does it mean to create systems where more women are at the peace table? Those I really want to look at women in all, or the feminine coming into all systems,
Hmm.
because those are the building blocks of the world that we're creating. I know that a lot of things are crumbling in our world,
Hmm.
and it's a very dicey time. It's scary for a lot of people. And I think I have kids. I love my kids more than, and I know that they and many of us are interested in
Hmm.
building a new era and a new world order. And that takes with like, okay, so what are we going to create here? What are we going to do now as we're transforming and trying to create something that works for everybody, a world that works for everybody? That's
Yeah.
really what I'd like to see.
And in one of your, it was you had two guests in that episode. I don't remember their names, but they were talking about patriarch dominance versus collaboration partnership models, and you said that it has been observed that when women have more power, men are more free to express their feminine sides as well. And so everything you're working on currently, as you said, is for the greater good. It's not just for, because I coach a lot of men also, and I often find that even though they are in a more privileged position in the patriarchal society, they are also um, hurting each other and themselves by trying to keep playing those roles, by not having all the emotions. I don't know if you read the book Man Enough. I don't remember. Man Enough, and it's written by what's his name? He's like a really he's an actor in like a romantic comedy series, and he talks about how he has been objectified as the handsome muscly dude, but like there's a moment where he says that when he was young he was very scared of heights, but although he was very scared he still did the bungee jumping when his dudes were watching out, because the fear of dying was less scary to men in this system than losing face in front of the other men. So at the end, they're gonna win too if we win together. So
100%. I mean, just looking at, what's happened in organizations, because of course, women coming into organizations is probably the largest change to organizational life
Mhm.
that's happened in the last 50 years.
Mhm.
And a lot of that's benefiting men, which in good ways,
Yeah.
is men also want to be fathers. They want parental leave. They want,
Mhm.
and some of the focus on gender and getting gender
Mhm.
right helps create those kinds of shifts.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, the reason I don't focus on men um, is only because I think that so many of us women, we're so good at focusing on men and taking care of
Yes.
men. So it's like, no, 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 no. Let's not do that right now. Let's like really focus on ourselves. This is not anti-men, but this is like
Exactly.
women forward. Let's like
That's
really,
not the house that's on fire. Let's focus on the house that needs the
yeah,
help currently.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally. So, well, I see time has just run out, but I was so happy to have this conversation with you. I can't wait to read your Substacks, hear you again on your podcast, and read your book. You are very generous. Thank you so much. And yeah, just looking forward to what's next with all your creativity. And thank you again so much for being with us. Is there any last thing you would like to say?
No, just thanks for reaching out, Nishem. I really appreciate it, and I love having these conversations. And yeah, for me, in this last chapter I've been having of doing a lot of writing, sometimes it's a little isolating. I mean, I love,
Mhm.
but it's a little bit like. So I really appreciate having a conversation because at the end of the day, I really just would like to see if I, create value for people
Mhm.
and help all of us in the conversations that we need to have to create a different kind of world order. And so do check out my Substack, Susan Coleman .substack.com if you're
Mhm.
interested. It's the easiest way to connect with me, or susancoleman.global is my website. I'm on LinkedIn, and I hope you and I stay connected, and I'm sure
Yeah,
we will.
I
Yeah,
hope so too. Thank you so much.
thank
And
you.
we will talk soon, I hope.